Welcome to IoT Coffee Talk.
Woohoo! It's so good to be here.
Are you thunderstruck? You look like you're thunderstruck.
I know I'm
Tiffany.
thunderstruck. I know I'm thunderstruck for sure, because we're going to save IoT with Thunderstruck. But,
Save IoT with 5G. You know, that rhymes. That rhymes.
Oh, wow. So I think we have got somebody on the show today that might know a little bit about 5G and cellular. Yeah.
I think so. And
where?
No, yeah.
I don't know if you guys are attending 5G Blitz Week.
I am. I'm listening in and out. Yeah.
I don't even know about it.
Yeah. Today I'm not. It's just not working out for the schedule. But yesterday I was attending a session in the afternoon that had very much to do with IoT for 5G. And there was a lot of conversation on the chat about the price of devices. And there was specifically about two people saying, the price of IoT device, the 5G IoT devices is so high, I'm looking at $10, $100, I'm still waiting, So there's a lot of exchange to that point. And somebody said, well, I have Sigfox and LoRa prices are high too, right? So right then I just kind of lost focus on listening to what they're talking about in live, right, in the panel. And I remembered when I first looked at IoT in a really serious way, because I co-authored a paper or I was a co-lead, actually, not co-author, but co-lead for a paper with 5G Americas. It was in 2016. So I had to work with Qualcomm, Nokia, and a bunch of people.
Who are they?
Intel. Yeah.
Who are they?
So, and I remember looking at the price of devices, and Rob, or cost of devices. Bob Gessel from Ericsson. So he and I had a ton of conversations, really specific conversations, and whiteboarding on, what are the components in the cost of the device, right? Where can functionality be squeezed out to lower the cost, or economies of scale can be achieved and all that. So we were saying, okay, well, now it looks like we're on track. We can get Cat-M1 and narrowband IoT under $1, right? It looks like that. So 5 years later, people are talking about that on the 5G side. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're talking about getting 5G that cheap, but I'm not sure we got 4G that cheap.
Yeah.
So what happened, right? So I just got really into it yesterday, into thinking, and I just didn't get enough hours in the day to start, researching.
That's such a valid point. The cost of the device is contributing to IoT not succeeding.
Yeah.
It's the microcontroller, the module for whatever networking you're using, all that kind of stuff. And then you add on the sensors, whatever the different environmental or whatever sensors you're adding to it. That cost is still just way too high. When I hear people say $1, $5, $10, they don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea how expensive these devices are and the associated sensors. They're horrible. So, for instance, we just did a trial for Thunderstruck out on a farm, and Ericsson, we're trying to seed the market. There are not very many cellular IoT devices out there. Most devices, they just come with Wi-Fi, or they may have Bluetooth. And to your point, Andrea, LoRa and Sigfox, especially LoRa. I see a lot of people using LoRa. But there's not a lot of cellular IoT devices out there, just in general. And so at Ericsson, we worked with Nordic Semiconductor and the folks over at Sigma, who used to be the old Sony Ericsson people in Sweden. And we built this device. The acronym is Ardesco. And so we just used a reference design so that it did NB-IoT and LTE-M, Cat-M1. It had a battery that would last about a year, which is great. It had temperature, humidity, air quality GPS, altitude, a few other things. We had a Grove connector, so we could connect a cord to do soil moisture. But the reference design, if you're making that device one at a time, it's over $100. It could be upwards to $200 per device if you're doing it one at a time. If I'm making 1 million of those, then maybe I can get the price down. I went to another event a week later, another ag event, and they're showing all this amazing tech out in this farm. But the takeaway was there's not a single farmer anywhere on the planet that can afford all this stuff.
Here's the thing. Before we get into introducing Andrea, let's say 10 minutes into the conversation, man, you know what? I don't know if IoT has failed. It's just failed, inflated expectations. It's where it's supposed to be. And maybe it can be a little further along if smart people like you guys are educating them, and more people are listening to folks like us versus these marketing folks who are just completely blowing the expectations out of the water and setting the entire industry up for failure because you're just making bad bets all across the board. And so maybe you have to think differently about maybe even agricultural IoT. Maybe we're looking too extreme. And so the way that we're designing and assuming solutions should be designed is not the way they should be designed, simply because we're going in there discovering bad economics at the moment. But they'll get better. But I just want to say that. But really quickly, hey, so who are you, stranger? You have to introduce yourself.
Okay, I didn't know that. YouTube, right? So I'm Andrea, and I like to think I'm a friend of Rob, and that through Rob I'm a friend of Leonard. So my background is very, very telecom centric. About 25 years since straight out of school, went to work for Ericsson. And never tried anything else for 25 years until this year when the circumstances were just beautiful for me to say, I want to pivot. And I'm pivoting. And, I can tell you openly, I'm pivoting to healthcare. It remains to be seen if I'm successful or not, but that's the pivot that I'm doing.
Well,
You're shaking your head. Yeah.
Everyone's pivoting.
Yeah.
It's called the pandemic pivot, and then we all have to learn how to pivot all the time. But I'm sure you're going to be wonderfully successful. We all have to try. And that,
so for me, the thing is, I've always been I call it a technology person, and nowadays so many people talk about that. I'm a tech geek. I'm technology. I'm a tech gal. I'm so this, and I'm not the one that open devices, right, to see what's inside, right. I'm in a way beyond that in my curiosity. I used to open VCRs and cassette players when I was 13, really? 14. Yeah. It was. I remember I grew up in Romania. Having a VCR was a huge treat. My parents would not let me touch it beyond plugging it in, getting a cassette in and out. And I couldn't wait for them to leave the house so I can open the lid and see what.
I love it.
And the thing is that I would open and I'd look inside, and there's nothing I could do, right? It was just more like, I think that's what this means, and I think that's what that means. Okay, I'm kind of done. I better put it together before they get back. So that was the extent, really. So don't think here I was inventing anything, but it was just fascinating stuff, right? But I don't do that now. For me now, it's all been about how does GSM work, right? So when I started working in telecom, I was in GSM. I was working with the first GSM system in the United States that came here in 1995. And I was asked to go meet the customer and do what we call the first office application demonstration of features, right? And then I said, I'm an engineer. I just came from school. How can I demonstrate features when I don't know what's inside the system, right? Yeah, well, sure, I can demonstrate them. I can follow a path, that somebody puts together for me, and I can do that, and I can, not be nervous. Maybe others are nervous, but I want to know what's inside, right? In terms of how these systems collaborate and communicate and messages. So that's what I've done my whole 25 years. Even when I moved into sales, I never lost track of how that system works, right? And for me, that's 5G, IoT. I was fascinated with IoT 5 years ago, I have to tell you. When I got into that white paper with 5G Americas, I volunteered for it. I was representing Ericsson, but I was very much it was a lot of self-interest. And the idea was to promote cellular IoT, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's who I am.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Kind of a long.
Awesome.
No, it's an awesome story and a continuing story. So thanks for sharing that. You're far braver than I am, because I remember how expensive VCRs were back in the day. I didn't have the guts to get in trouble with my parents ripping it open to figure out.
In Romania, this was in the 80s. We paid 10 times my mother's salary for a VCR. I remember that.
Wow.
Her monthly salary. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, that's a great message for all of the 5G IoT holdouts who think that it's never going to be possible to instrument an entire vineyard. Eventually, it'll get that cheap. Do you know what I'm saying? It just may not be now. But
yeah, but you know what? You were talking earlier about IoT, failure or not. Absolutely not. I do not consider it a failure. There's no doubt for me that is not. But what I see is I just don't see focus in an economy of scale way. Yeah. Which is for mobile broadband, that's always the case because it's pretty simple. Right. Yeah. So I remember when we first sold 3G HSPA to AT&T, was Singular, 2003. I was the tech lead for Ericsson in that. It was a year-long project. And at the end of that, then they start implementing. I pivoted. I was in the same organization, but I pivoted to something else. Like, let's use this 3G system for mobile TV. Mm-hmm. Let's start watching TV on it. And the customer AT&T was saying, well, absolutely not. The cost per gigabyte is prohibitive. There's no way we can do this. And I said, well, but the system has quality of service assurance and this, and we can do the radio assurance connected to the transport assurance. And the CTO of AT&T was like, yeah, sure you can. It cost me an arm and a leg, right? But the industry, because mobile TV at the core of it is one application. Yeah. Right. It's one single application. The industry just got behind it, right, and evolved, and 4G came, and boom, we have mobile TV everywhere. People don't even use the term mobile TV, right? Yeah. But when it comes to IoT, I don't see the same, and I don't see it not because people don't want to do it. In my mind, I think it's complex.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is. And when you think about, I mean, you're bringing up some really great stuff. One of the things that I thought was missing from a lot of conversations in 5G Blitz was security. And Rob and I were actually just talking about it before we jumped on here. It's where is this talk about the security benefits of cellular networks and architectures, right? For IoT, where is the discussion around how do we arrive at, assurance and being able to guarantee like URLLC or ultra reliable, low latency communications, quality of service, right? And experience. I mean, we're talking about different levels of network performance and capabilities that the telco universe it needs to get used to or pursue, because I mean, that's kind of like the promise of 5G. But it's also really the tough stuff, right, Andrea? And you and I and Rob have been on, Clubhouse and a bunch of other forums kind of chatting about this stuff. But, I thought that was sort of what is still missing especially for industrial IoT as it relates to, well, 5G as it relates to industrial IoT. I think we're still at the low-hanging fruit, enhanced mobile broadband stuff. And, we barely made the pivot from talking about downlink to what's more important, uplink.
Uplink, yeah.
No one's talking. I mean, Ericsson talks about, because you guys have that, or Ericsson has the fast uplink technology. Huawei has their super uplink. So there's starting to be some conversation about that, but maybe we'll see more of that with 5G Advanced. I know that's part of the 3GPP roadmap and objectives for release 18. Probably, I don't know. Anyways, those are just my thoughts and how I've reacted to. Some of my thoughts and takes on some of the 5G IoT related conversations that I've either been in or have witnessed.
I don't even know what this 5G blitz thing is you're talking about. I obviously missed out on all
Fierce wireless. Yeah, it's Fierce wireless.
Yeah, our buddy David was on.
Really?
David Vasquez, our own David Vasquez was on. Yeah, talking about actually 5G and IoT.
And that was, okay, so David Vasquez, I don't, but he was one of the panelists in the session yesterday. Yeah. And this was my first exposure to him. And I actually really, really, really enjoyed when he stepped in and spoke about things, because he talked. Are you laughing at me? Or he talked like a manufacturer. He talked like a business owner, small business owner. He talked like a person who faced the problem, and now he's on the other side, right? So I really. But, when it comes to IoT, so if we leave healthcare aside, which is my number one passion, I would say if I didn't have to work for a living, here's what I would like to do. I'd like to just travel the world and treat IoT like a startup idea. Just IoT is as a whole. And I know, Rob, you could say like, man, all this work has been done. What are you talking about? You don't know. You just don't know. But I would say I want to travel everywhere, see for myself what are the problems, what are the problems that we're solving, and what are the opportunities. Just really simply, and interview the heck out of people, right? Yeah. And again, treat it like a startup, and then feel like, okay, now I can save IoT, right? Yeah. Because I got a really good idea and I can make recommendations. I know that's. Out there now, the thought.
Yeah, well, here's the way I look at it. So we played Thunderstruck, or I did, and I did it pretty awesome, right, Rob? I know you were just
awesome, dude.
Away by
you need to Lollapalooza.
It's one of my favorite pieces, so you hit me there too.
So this is you always say IoT has failed. I think what you're doing and what you recognize is we're doing IoT wrong. And I think there's a difference. You get to fail if you do things wrong. And I think when Rob says, he's out to save IoT, it's really bringing not just the questions. We can ask as many questions as we want and still not get to the right place, right? It's channeling that experience. And I think there's a lot of validity in someone like Rob and others who are brave enough to jump onto IoT Coffee Talk and just get ripped apart. Not that's what we try to do. Having that experience and being able to see the path to doing it smart, that helps us avoid perceived failure. And I'm not a big fan of this failure culture. People who follow me on LinkedIn probably occasionally see me troll folks who kind of celebrate failure, fail fast and fail often. All this is like, no, learn from experience. I mean, that's I call stupid. Smart is you learn from people who have experience. You pressure test everything that you're doing, even if it's a very aggressive concept you're trying to push. But learn from people who know. Because there are people on the sidelines that are watching you going, And right now, because of the hype, there's this critical mass of just stupid that is guiding people in the wrong way. And so, all the stuff that we talk about, a lot of the stuff that we talk about in IoT Coffee Talk, I think can contribute to having a more grounded conversation that leads us to smarter paths versus stupid paths that lend to failure. So, so anyways, that's all I gotta say. That's my Forrest Gump moment. That's about as good as I can do. Yeah, that's all I gotta say about that.
Well, I worship Forrest Gump, so that's Forrest Gump I follow that guy around. I remember I first started following him when he was jogging through Monument Valley, and so I was running behind him. I was so disappointed when he stopped and said, "All right, I'm all done with that." It's like, what are we gonna do now? Yeah,
I thought you were the reporter that was following him when he had that "it happens" moment that inspired.
True. Yeah, true. I feel like I've been on a similar mission to like what Andrea is talking about when she talks about wanting to go around the world and interview people and what's going on, Yeah. And so, that's what started this whole Thunderstruck project is, okay, been doing this a long time. It's not failing. It's underperforming though. And you can sit back and go, oh, why is that? Oh, it's really complex. It requires a lot of different skill sets that typically one person doesn't have all of them. And even a lot of people don't have all of those skill sets to do IoT. How can I automate and streamline all those things? Security is one we talk about. It's funny. Security is something that's been growing inside the Thunderstruck platform. What the original intent was not to be all about security, but now it's just like serious USS Enterprise deflector shield security. It's ready to be taking hits from the Borg, which just turns out is important. When I was working on Thunderstruck last year, security was a minor part of it, and now I talk to people. In the last 6 months, we had solar winds, we had the Colonial Pipeline. Everybody's getting hacked into oblivion, and I was talking to a private equity guy yesterday. And he was asking me about it. He goes, dude, that's all you should talk about with Thunderstruck is security. He goes, people are freaking out. Yeah. It's getting so bad out there. And it's a good point. It wasn't the original intent, but security is a big deal. And then the last part, what's holding back IoT is just cost. You get something working in the lab and you go, hey, that's great. But you try to deploy it at scale and it starts to add up, And so cost of communications, cost of devices, sensors, platforms, all that stuff, when you add it all, everybody's got their hand out, right? Everybody wants to get paid. And when you add all that money together, sometimes you go, oh, this was not worth doing because I'll never get an ROI on this because it cost me so much. And so that's something we have to solve. And I've been trying to work on that a little more lately, as I'm spending time with the agriculture folks. If you have a $200 device, sensor, communication, battery, blah, blah, blah thing, and the person owns the farm, maybe they've got 3,500 acres, and they say, hey, let's just do the minimum. Let's just do one sensor per acre, which doesn't sound like very much. You can do the math. All of a sudden, that's $700,000 just to deploy sensors. Then you got to talk about what kind of communications are you going to use? Cellular, LoRa, whatever platform. And so all of a sudden, you can imagine how some people are like, well, that's just a non-starter. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so why we often get the E rating on our podcast is that I think the secret is we're going to have to Walmart the shit out of this thing.
Totally.
That's how we're going to get to mass adoption. We're going to kill complexity. We're going to totally deliver security. and we're going to beat up on the prices of everything so that everybody can do it.
I got one more for you. And you heard it here first. You also have to wirelessly air gap everything.
Whew. Wirelessly air gap.
Wirelessly and virtually.
That sounds like a private network.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it does.
I think the farm needs its own private network.
Yes, exactly. And so, no doubt about it. If they're using cellular, then maybe they need to think about doing some slicing. Maybe but then again, it depends on cost. If the mega farms, if they could do a license to do some CBRS out where they are, and then they can build a private solution that where you're right, they have their own SIM writer and every device and everything is created by them and they have the entire encrypted network, then if it's affordable, then I agree totally.
Yeah.
But if we look at the device you are holding, is that, when you think of IoT, is it one size fits all, one architecture fits all? Because, the globe is big, right? The economy of scale is there. It's one.
No, you're right.
But it's not.
Right. You're right. One size does not fit all. And the kind of things, if I'm a manufacturer in China, I'm going to build that tech capability into the machines, the little giant machines I'm making. Yeah. And so I will put in compute, storage, networking, interface with sensors and actuators, and that'll be part of my product. That's the only way we're going to get to those big numbers, is it has to happen at time of manufacturing. Which it's not really happening very much right now. Right now, it's a lot of retrofitting, aftermarket, whatever you want to call it. And so I've often said, even from the beginning of IoT, when we started with IoT, you saw a lot of consumer stuff, the IoT coffee pot, the IoT toaster, and people, it was costing too much. You see these consumer the IoT version of an existing consumer product, and it costs like 4 times more. And I'm like, the only way you're going to have success is all that IoT stuff, the compute, networking, storage, all that stuff. The cost of that needs to be less than 1% of the total cost of the whole product. Or you're just never going to have any broad adoption. You'll have early adopters who like to geek out and they have a lot of money, but you'll never have masses of people doing it. So that's where I'm at with big things. If you're inside buildings and factories where there's electricity, you can have bigger systems. If it's high volume data, you'll have different things. The only reason I held this up is just like a little Arduino microcontroller that actually has built-in LoRa built into it. Actually, this would be like for a farmer. And on a farmer, they don't have as big a margins as making money as other industries do. And so they're much more cost conscious. And so, but I'm not going to send a lot of data back either. I'm just going to get temperature and humidity and soil moisture and a few other things. So it's no big deal. And I'm just going to send little tiny bits of data. So I don't have to do anything crazy. But you're right. It's got to be appropriate for the business they're in and the margins that their business makes.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a philosophic thought here. It feels sometimes like the market is waiting for the use cases where a lot of data needs to be sent, because it's saying, the use cases with very little data to be sent, I don't know. We've been on them for several years. Let's work these other use cases.
Yeah.
And let's have those succeed, and then we work backwards from there. This is how it feels sometimes. What do you think?
Well, there's all those big data people and those AI big data people that feel like the only way they're going to derive insights is having tons of data to analyze. And so I totally understand that group of people especially when they're looking to the future and predictive stuff. I totally understand it. But that being said, there's nothing wrong with baby steps. And what if my only use case in a farm is I want to reduce water usage for irrigation for 2 reasons. It's going to save me money because I have to purchase water. Now in Washington State, water is almost free, but if in California, it costs a fortune. And also I want to be sustainable. I want to save the planet. because we don't have a lot of water left. Yeah. And so I don't need AI or anything. In fact, I could just do this with a moisture sensor, and the moisture, it could be a simple threshold. The moisture sensor is just telling me from 0 to 100%, 0 being completely dry, 100% being totally underwater, and just creating simple thresholds, right? KPIs, and having that automated with your irrigation system. Turn it on when it needs water, turn it off when it doesn't need water. If I can cut my water usage by 50%, saves me a lot of money, and I'm helping the planet.
Yeah.
And I don't need AI for that.
But yeah,
and that's it. Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Please.
Oh, a couple of thoughts there. When you talk about water, I was thinking about that when I was in Romania last week, actually. Just thinking how do this, Romania has a lot of agriculture, a lot of, small farms, and, how do they handle water, right? And I extrapolated from there to Africa, right? And other places. How do they handle if this kind of innovation that saves water? I'm looking to places like Africa, right, to learn from, believe it or not. And I don't know anything about it, I haven't researched it or anything. I don't know if you want to have anything to say about that.
No, I think that's important stuff. If the only thing I could do was help save water, this stuff, that would be enough for me.
Yeah.
Because we on a planetary scale, we've got big problems with fresh water.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking is China, right? Because even in Blitz Week, 5G Blitz Week yesterday, there was somebody from China Mobile. I think somebody who lives in the US. Right. Yeah. And at some point he spoke about IoT being so big in China. And then, from my time at Ericsson, I know about the business deals in 2018, 19, we were signing with various operators in China. So, if what's under the hood there, what can we get from there? What can we learn from China?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
China has definitely been the biggest buyer and deployer of NB-IoT in the world.
Right.
Well, they're all in with NB-IoT.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. NB-IoT will get better. It's not living up to what we said it would do just yet.
Yeah.
That we tried to copy Sigfox and LoRa.
Yeah.
By creating NB-IoT, and we just used their playbook and said, oh yeah, the battery will last for 10 years.
Yeah.
It turns out it's not even close. But I know later releases of our 3GPP spec will help improve that process to get that battery life down. But yeah, that's part of it, and also when we think about that, when you think about power, energy, it's like, let's help reduce our energy usage along the way, right? Mm-hmm. If I've got sensors out in the field and I'm trying to figure out how much or little water I should be using, if I have to keep going out there and changing batteries all the time, just the act of doing that also hurts my ROI for doing IoT, right? Yeah. And so that's an issue, I mean, I pieced together just some there's a lot of detailed things I would do just specifically in agriculture, but I also just pieced together some high level things. What do they want to do? They want to increase their crop yields. They want to grow more crops, because what's the other problem that we have going on in the world right now? We have massive overpopulation. What are we at 7 billion, and we're going to be at 9 billion in a couple more decades, something like that. And so we have more people that we have to feed. We're losing water. We're also losing good land.
Yeah.
I don't want to derail this conversation and talk about how we're destroying the soil of the planet and it's all turning to desert, and that's all fixable, but we have to do it. But we're killing our own land all over the world because of horrible, bad farming process, ideas that came from, 50 years ago, And so we got to save the soil. We got to save our water. We got to reduce the amount of electricity we're using. and do more with less, right? And so if IoT can be a helper in that, along with lots of good education, then yeah, we should be all in.
Yeah.
And then climate's kind of in the background with the whole thing, right?
Yeah. So, bringing the conversation back to 5G, I wanted to get some of your thoughts, Andrea, because I know that you're super interested in all this stuff about, what difference does, in your mind, or what is that elevator pitch that you give to folks on behalf of the greater 5G good for IoT? I mean, what are those bullet points that you usually put in front of folks? Because I totally appreciate that you look at it from a system perspective, because most of us don't. We look at it from a buzzword and a high level BS bullet point perspective, right? Really rudimentary understanding of it's faster, and I can do AR VR craziness with it. What are some of what are some of those thoughts that you usually share with folks as they ask the question, what does 5G do to change IoT?
Yeah, so the first thought, of course, I start a bit backwards, right? First thought that comes to mind is URLLC, right?
Yeah.
Which is further into the future, right? That's not low-hanging fruit for 5G IoT, but for that, all that is the number one thing that is really exciting to me is the possibility to do ultra low latency communication, like sub-millisecond.
Right.
That's a big thing. I mean, that's the number one 5G thing, right? And I think it's well recognized. And whether you're talking about using it for remote surgery or whatever, the use case doesn't matter, right? But in this context, but that capability of sub-millisecond communication, to me, that's huge, and that's 5G. The other thing that comes to mind is, the ability to use all this other spectrum that could not be used with previous technologies, just because the way the technology was defined, right? So, even though we may use the same modulation techniques, there was a lot of other parameters around that precluded or, prohibit, so to say, not preclude, but prohibit, 4G or the spectrum to be used with 4G, and then the opportunities with 5G. And so in that space, you start getting into, now my mind's you said I look at the system, right? My mind went straight to the antenna, and I'm thinking of the radio part and that communication there, and then the kind of antenna arrays and the continuous optimization of that communication in order to increase accuracy, speed, and coverage and all that, right? So that's what 5G.
Yeah,
I wasn't quite an elevator pitch, was it? I have to work on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll tell you right now, you've done a fantastic job compared to other pitches I've heard. And it's helpful. I think that's the most important thing. But I totally agree with you. The more I delve into the radio, what it's going to take to deliver on some of the URLLC promises of 5G, and what actually is needed in all these different constraints. Well, see, here's the takeaway that I'm getting from this discussion. 5G needs to have a value proposition that it builds up for various constrained environments. In one hand, you have the stuff that Rob's dealing with, right? Where you need low power, long range. It doesn't need to be all that reliable, but it should be reliable. But it also needs to be secure. But it's not absolutely critical. But the constraint is in power, and it really boils down to power and range, right? Then you have these other constrained and this other variety on this other side of the diametric, which is the smart factory type, constrained environments where you are looking at the sub-millisecond requirements. for latency, and then the 12 nines, 5 9 plus industrial reliability of the communications, right? And the state of 5G at the moment is that it really is not positioned to address value to those constrained scenarios yet, right? And that when you do look at things like URLLC, it's harder than hell, especially getting the reliable part, even in a indoor environment. And so when you look at smart factories, and I'm dying to go and check out the Ericsson smart factory in is it Louisville? Yeah, I really want to delve into that because there's 25 use cases that was cited by Mark. I think his name is Mark Ham. He's the architect, right? I really like to get down into the weeds with that to figure out, okay, well, what are you guys really doing, and how are you architecting and designing the network to deliver on these really extreme performance requirements, right?
Right.
None of this stuff. I mean, the interesting thing is the technology's there. Maybe the economics are not there quite yet, and I think a lot of the challenges right now is from an engineering perspective. So it's not just engineering the technology from a basic system perspective. It's engineering the implementation and then getting the assurance, all these other things that you need, the assurance part of it. It's just like friggin' ridiculously complex. And then you can apply that even into the field, try making 5G competitive with LoRa and all these alternate Sigfox and all these alternatives. It's another challenge for the 5G camp, I don't know.
Are you aware of a comprehensive list of what are the constraints, bottlenecks, problems, right? That maybe we can compile, right? Because we talked about IoT and in that context, and then you brought it to engineering, and I completely agree. That's why I was smiling. And engineering.
I thought you were smiling because I look funny.
No. Engineering.
He only smiles when I look funny or say something really stupid.
Everything, okay, here's something I like to say. Everything is a network. I look at everything as a network. Even my garden is a network, right? When I approach gardening, I treat it as a network, right? There are components, there are entry points, there are integration points, there's communication, there's flow, there's et cetera, et cetera. The human body is a network, the healthcare system is a network. So everything is a network, right? So what I think of sometimes is, listen, 5G is just bringing so much good stuff on the radio side for the RF engineers, from the RF engineers, from the RF designers to the RF engineers. There's such great stuff. If only the rest of the network could handle it, we would have it, right? Yeah. But it takes changes in the rest of the network to make the radio part work and to make us leverage the radio part, the capabilities. And this is when you get into the complexities, as you called it, engineering. We don't lack use cases. The world doesn't lack use cases.
Or imagination.
The world doesn't lack, skill sets or engineers, but there's so much experimentation that is required. And all of a sudden, I'm jumping topics, but the hyperscalers came into play, right? And it's super intriguing. And this is one place where I like to go and do interviews, right? And understand part of that. If I didn't have to work for a living, what would I do? I'd just buy myself tickets and go everywhere, right? And buy lunches, dinners, and interview, and then come to some conclusions, right? Not just interview for the sake of it, but how do they play? And I'm trying to see into the future. I'm really trying to. I've learned in the last couple of years, in the last 2-3 years, I've kind of changed myself to where I don't look at the future only based on research that I do and things I learn. I don't have a whole lot of time to learn everything that exists.
Yeah.
I look into the future based on things I imagine, right? and try to work backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I think your new tagline for you, Andrea, is everything is a network.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I was told that in another environment. Everything is a network. Somebody put in the chat quotation, Andreea Timberlake.
Yeah.
Said, yeah.
I think we should go with that. I think that's your deal. I mean, it's funny. You think about computer networks, you think about how factories run today, they run with this today.
Yeah.
Ethernet. Ethernet is how factories operate today.
Yes.
And why is that? Well, because factories of today are typically fixed assembly lines that just don't move around. And even though we love our wireless technology, there's nothing faster or more reliable than Ethernet. It's not even close, actually. In fact, we use Ethernet as part of our networks when we build 5G, front haul stuff and everything like that before we go to fiber. Why does private networks, 5G networks or otherwise, why is that more secure? When I plug an Ethernet cable into this, I don't have to authenticate with this network at all. It just lets me on, and I'm on. Now, my endpoint may have to authenticate with a server, but to be on this network, it just lets me on. Whereas when we talk about our private 5G networks, you have to have a SIM to be connected to this network. Yeah. And if you don't have the SIM that this network knows about, you're not getting on. And then the entire thing is encrypted, right? Yeah. I think that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And we've talked about as we go, this whole industry 4.0 stuff that started in Germany, with the use cases are really different. And we're going to move away from fixed assembly lines. And we're going to have agile things moving around all the time. And it's just going to require wireless because things are good. They're just moving around too much, And so having expensive cabling everywhere is not going to be the answer, in the future, at least. It's the answer now, but in the future, it just won't be.
But, it's like what David said on, it's going to be heterogeneous. It's going to be a heterogeneous environment, hybrid environment as well. And so to sit there and assume that you're going to sell in 5G to replace everything is just an asinine thought. Same with Wi-Fi, same with, Ethernet eventually. The difficult case to sell is this whole idea or the fool's errand is to go and pursue this idea that all manufacturing is going to be modular. That's a huge structural issue in the industrial model that needs to change, and it's not going to change anytime soon. I mean, that's just a reality. Mass production is still the de facto mode of manufacturing. Mass customization, mass personalization, all the stuff that they're starting to talk about in Industry 5.0. I was looking at this stuff.
You just triggered me
a decade ago.
You just triggered me.
What?
Saying ridiculous things like Industry 5.0, that just triggers me.
Oh, then Vernon's going to kick your ass. He's going to set you straight, brother.
Yeah, I see what he talks about. All this stuff he's attributing to Industry 5.0 is actually part of Industry 4.0.
Yeah. Okay, well, you set him straight. He might have some differing thoughts there, and that's
like people talking about 6G.
6G? Oh, yeah.
The same shit.
I know.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Rob, we would have a G rating on this show. I just want you to know that, Andrea. It's just completely ridiculous. And now the guy comes out with a cowboy hat, thinks he's like the Jeff Bezos of IoT.
I just got back from being in my rocket ship. Yeah. I'm out in West Texas. I hop off my rocket, jump in my pickup truck, and go connect to 5G.
Where are you now? Are you in Texas?
No, I wish. I'm in Seattle.
You're back home? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at home. But I'm about to leave. I'm going to head to Colorado pretty soon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, wow, we're up on our time. This has been a great conversation. Andrea, so glad to have you on,
I love it too.
It's really fun.
Absolutely.
And, wow. But you know what? That thing that you just said is what would be the requirements of these constrained environments? And I mean, yeah, you can definitely put those together. Who knows? Maybe that'll be a next curve research project. So any of you guys want to hire us to do that, happy to do it. That's a shameless plug for my company. But
I've got $100,000 burning a hole in my pocket, and I would love for you to write me a 6-page report so I could give you that money.
Yeah.
So that's what I need.
I'll shape the demand, brother. No, but you know, I think there's just a lot of hard work. And to what you're saying, the point that you're saying, Andrea, you know, the 5G has some crazy, ridiculous stuff for the telco industry. Is how do you translate that now outside to the verticals that they're trying to pursue, where they think that there's this new money. I don't, you know, honestly, I don't see a lot of this new money for the telcos. You know, especially in the U.S. I'm sure David's gonna.
You mean revenue? You mean revenue?
Revenue,
for
like
the
this
telcos?
exponential revenue. I mean, it's still really early days, but I think the CTOs of these companies, as they're working with some of the industry groups, they're going, wow, this stuff is really pretty nutty, you know. And the state of their networks are nowhere near what it's going to take to support the URLC requirements in industrial environments. Whether it's indoors on a factory floor or outdoors on roadside, right. You know, it's like, but you know, my key takeaway from this, which I think is really awesome, is that you have to understand the economics and the learnings of all the people who have done the experiment. Don't redo those friggin' experiments. You know, get the ball moving forward. And I think rather than going and trying so much, you need to learn from people who are not just pumping a bunch of hype. You know, and I think that's just a lot of what VCs are funding at the moment. A bunch of people who just have this idea, there's no substance to it, and they fund it anyways because they don't know any better. And there's just entrepreneurs that are just they think that there's this huge TAM, and you just have 10 minutes with them and you understand. You guys don't even understand, number one, the technology or the market, you know. And those are things that we need to reverse so that energy gets placed into you know, moving the IoT ball and the 5G ball forward. All this other stuff is just a tremendous waste of time. And I can tell you right now, the Chinese don't work like this, and I think it's their competitive advantage, right? There's accountability there. If you screw up, you know, it's
different kind of.
Here, we give you the CEOs get a bonus. You know,
your exit package, your parachute.
Exit package,
yeah, we get started on that. Or my favorite case that I've become kind of irritated with Uber, right? Uber, Uber innovation. I don't know how you feel about that, so maybe I shouldn't go there. But
we go everywhere.
Pumping money into Uber.
Yeah.
Where Uber cannot even tell you exactly how long it will take before your driver is there. Yeah. This is my pet peeve for the month of July. You have no idea how many times I complained, not that anybody could do anything, when I was in Romania, and I'd see the driver, he'll be there in 10 minutes, and he'll be there in 16 minutes because of unforeseen traffic issues. And I would say, hey, the technology is there. Figure out what's on the road. What do you mean?
Yeah.
See?
Why do I have to plan 16 minutes or 20 minutes when you tell me it's 10 minutes away, right? So that's my...
Right. And you know what? That's awesome. You could be a solution architect for them. You can go, they can hire you because you know how to solve it, right?
Yeah, but that's boring. For me, that's boring.
You just want to travel around the world and talk to people and then eventually write a book and sell millions.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of traveling and interviewing people, so... I'm going to be in Germany for most of the month of September. Yeah, I know. because of, I can do it through COVID and because of this year, the way it is for me, right? So I'm going to stay for visit friends in southern Germany, which is where the industries and everything is, right? Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg. And one of my goals is to try to talk to various doctors and, kind of interviews with my pivoting in mind.
Okay. Well, keep us posted.
I'm super excited about that. I have no idea what it's going to look like. It's in September, so it's a long way from now. So, I do a lot of iterations all the time. My life is an iteration. Oh, that's another one.
Boom. That's
I'm serious.
That is gold.
So everything is a network. My life is an iteration.
Life is iteration. Wow.
Yes. And I got another one that some people made fun of. The cloud keeps moving.
That's so true. That's
the cloud keeps moving. So, we didn't talk about cloud and edge and all that now in architectures, but the cloud keeps moving.
Yeah. No. That's beautiful. Maybe we'll have you on to have another. I mean, edge is a very popular topic, and we get a lot of requests now to talk about. So maybe we'll have you jump on with us, and you can share your thoughts there in a future episode. Sure. But man, we are way over. I'm way out of coffee. So Rob, Mr. Cowboy, Jeff Bezos of IoT, please take us out, my friend. And thank you, Andrea, for showing up and being so brave as to hang out with us. Hopefully your reputation isn't too tarnished.
I hope you did. We'll check the ratings and all that afterwards, but I had a ton of fun, which I expected.
That's
it was
awesome.
Not unexpected. I had a ton of fun. So
awesome.
if you were to call me again next week, I'll be like, I'll make time for it.
Hint, wink,
that's
wink.
Good to hear.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's right. We more women from Texas on the show, like Stephanie.
Yeah, Stephanie. I was telling Leonard, I met Stephanie at a 5G Americas event, I think when it was called 3G Americas. And it's at least 10 years ago. She was an analyst, and I was doing analyst interviews for Ericsson, and she was an analyst, and we just connected in LinkedIn. We never communicated since.
Yeah,
it's really cool to see where she's now.
That's really cool. That's great.
Fantastic. We love her.
She does. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for coming to this week's episode of the IoT Coffee Talk. Everything is a network. Life is, what is it? Incremental iteration. Life's iteration. It's been great having Andrea on here, my cohort, my Ericsson homie, and also on Clubhouse. That's good stuff. Yeah. So if you guys want to check out IoT Coffee Talk, we've got, how many episodes have we done? 60.
This is like 65, I think. I'm wrong by one or plus.
So go out to iotcoffeetalk.com. You can check us out. We're YouTubers. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple, iTunes, podcasts. Everywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us everywhere.
Yes.
In fact, you may not want to find us in some cases. And in every direction you look, you're like, oh no, it's littered again. Oh my God.
Or we can iterate until we find you.
Exactly. There you go. There you go.
Exactly.
And on the cloud that always moves.
Yes.
Will be eventually ubiquitous.
Wait until we talk about AI.
There you go.
We're saving that
one. We're going to save that. So make sure you subscribe and check us out. We're here every week, flooding the airwaves with individual nuggets of genius.
Yeah. Get thunderstruck. Thunderstruck, baby.
Absolutely.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.